What is up? We're going to talk about dynamic TAO implementation on the Bittensor network and how you cannot actually trade the subnet tokens, because a lot of people appear to believe that when dynamic TAO is implemented on the network, that they will be able to trade these dynamic tokens. And that's not exactly how this is going to work. We're also going to cover the emission schedule, because the network is now going to be emitting 2 different tokens. And the total supply of TAO per day could actually come down, which we're going to talk about that. And then some more of the interesting takeaways from the implementation of dynamic TAO. But first, if this is your first time here, what's good? My name is Sam. For those of you who are returning, it's good to freaking see you. And then we'll just get into some thoughts at the end of the video. So I've gone through all of the documentation on dynamic TAO on their website, and this is what we've got here. So this dynamic TAO is being implemented to basically strengthen the network from like multiple different angles. And it's going to affect the emissions of this. It's also going to affect how like you can earn, because now you can actually earn in 2 different ways. Basically the price appreciation of the subnet specific token relative to TAO, as well as the emissions that are earned through staking. So you can actually have 2 different ways to earn in this pool. I guess you could say it might be, you can earn 3 different ways, right? If you have price appreciation of TAO, you have DTAO for that specific subnet that is going up, and you're also earning emissions on that subnet. You could say that there's 3 different ways you could actually earn USD value through this, or more TAO, I guess. Well, yeah, USD value, I guess you could say. So the Bittensor network is submitting, after this implementation, is going to be implementing 2 different tokens that they're going to emit, which could actually decrease the amount of total TAO that is like inflated per day. Right now it's around 7,200 TAO per day that are put into the system. But after this implementation, they're actually not going to do this. And prior to this, I think I actually have a diagram in here. Let's see where how it used to be. So it used to be like this, where the inflation in the system, say if there's multiple different subnets, this is where we currently are, right? So there's multiple different subnets where that subnet relative to all the other subnets performance on the network gets, the subnet owner gets 18%, the validator gets 41%, the miner gets 41%. According to their documents, this has not changed. However, how this is going to take place is going to change. So we're going to go back over here. All of these tokens are going to be distributed to the pool, the miners, the validators, and the subnets, right? So we're going to add another category of bucket that catches the inflation of the system. And it's going to be in these 2 currencies, right? This is, you can think of this as like, you know, DTAO subnet 1, DTAO subnet 2, etc. kind of thing. Each one's going to have a separate one, but you don't actually get them in your wallet. So people, I've heard very like, I thought intelligent people say that they're going to get these in their TAO. They're going to, take your TAO and you're basically going to stake them at the subnet level, and then you're going to receive DTAO in return. But that's not exactly how it's going to work if you read through what they actually have on their site here. Well, how it's going to work is you're going to take your TAO, you're going to stake it at the subnet level. You're not going to actually get any DTAO. Yes, that's right. You are not going to actually receive any DTAO. Once you stake your TAO at the subnet level, then you choose a validator, right? So say you choose validator 1. So you stake it subnet 1, and you choose validator 1. That TAO is going to be converted to DTAO. The DTAO is now going to live on that subnet, that validator, so validator 1. So the validator 1 is now going to have that DTAO that you would have had. You're not getting in your wallet. You can't actually trade it. There's nothing you can do with it. It's actually going to go to the validator, not you. Now, the ratio at which TAO is converted to DTAO is going to be using the constant. This basically this formula here. This is like similar to how V2 Uniswap works or other V2 versions for like Axis work, where I'd say X is TAO and Y is DTAO. Those are going to fluctuate, but K, the constant, is always going to stay the same. So this means that when somebody stakes, it's actually going to impact the price of DTAO and the price of TAO relative to DTAO, right? You're basically saying the same thing. And when somebody unstakes, it does exactly the same thing. It reduces the price of DTAO and increases the price of TAO, which we're going to talk about that more in a minute. Actually, I already did right here. Staking increases DTAO price relative to TAO. Unstaking decreases TAO price relative to TAO. So that's just a function of this formula here. So if you have staked into this pool, you will receive, well, the validator of your choice will receive DTAO. You will not receive DTAO. And let's say there's other people that come in and stake after you. They are going to get a worse price, a worse ratio of TAO to DTAO. Right? So on the one hand, you have an incentive here to be first to stake in these pools, assuming there's going to continue operating. Because if you believe that two things, if you believe the network as a whole is going to continue to grow, and you believe that that subnet specifically is still going to stay around, then if you are first to stake in that subnet, then you will have the best ratio, meaning the best price of TAO for DTAO in there. Because as soon as somebody else comes in after you, they get a worse price. However, to throw a little wrench in there, when the network sends out emissions, they're going to send out emissions in TAO and DTAO. These emissions are going to actually affect this ratio here. It's going to affect the constant K. Right? So like when people stake versus unstaking, it's going to affect X and Y. That's staking and unstaking. When there's inflation in the system, that's going to affect K, right? And this is going to happen it's super interesting. So the formulas they get into in here basically say that we're adding up the prices of all the subnets, the ratio of those prices. If that's less than 1 or greater than 1, that's going to dictate whether they're emitting TAO or they're going to emit DTAO into that specific subnet pool. Now, some of these things could change as time goes on, and I'll do videos on those things as well. So when you think about this, there's emissions in the system. Those emissions, if there are TAO emissions into the system, then that's going to increase the price of the subnet token. Because you're in this formula here, you're basically adding more X to this formula. So the constant is going to change, but effectively the proportion is going to be different. So the math on this leads to an increase in DTAO price, right? So every time the system, the network emits TAO based on that formula of the aggregation of the subnet prices, and if it's less than 1 or greater than 1, If it's less than 1, then they're going to emit d-tau. If it's greater than 1, they're going to emit tau, right? So that's how you can get a lower total emissions than 7,200 tau per day, because it's not actually going to emit tau, it's going to emit d-tau into the system. So if you're emitting, the system's emitting tau into the system, then it's going to increase the prices of the dynamic tokens in each subnet. It's going to decrease the price of tau. So let's run through this, see if I can walk through it. If you have this formula here, let's say, and this is 100 on this side here. I'll try to do this now. This is 100, and this is equal to 10 times 10, right? Now, if the inflation in the system comes down and there's, say, one additional tau, if X is tau in this example, and Y is d-tau, right? So the inflation in the system is tau. Right? It's going to inflate tau in this formula here, the constant product formula. And what that does is, relative to d-tau, tau is less. It basically pushes this down relative to this, and then it changes this to that, right? So the ratio actually changes. If we solve for like one or the other, I can show you this, but I didn't prepare that in advance, so you won't actually be able to see. Let's say X equals Y divided by K or something like that, right? Yeah. Okay. So then this, in the same example, right? We have 100 equals 10 times 10, and then move this out of the way. Kind of blind, but we should have prepared this in advance. So now, after the emissions come into the system, the K number actually changes. We have 11 tau in this pool at the subnet level, and we still have the same number of d-tau, 10 here, right? So if you now solve for X, right, in each of these scenarios, so X equals 10 divided by 100 here, and then X equals 10 divided by 100, right? That's correct. Right, so the proportion in there will change. It goes from 10% down to like 9% or something like that. But effectively, what this does is it reduces the price of the other token. If tau is emitted, then it reduces the price of tau and increases the price of d-tau. And the same thing happens in inverse, d-tau. So d-tau are emitted to these pools. And it's interesting how they're actually going to emit these into the pools. So if it's tau that's emitted into these pools, what ends up happening is it's 1 tau per 12 seconds, right, that is emitted and it's distributed across the specific network. If it is d-tau, it's actually 1 d-tau per subnet or something along those lines. And this they do mention as a disclaimer could potentially change how the emissions are emitted, but that is the current understanding that they've put out about how this is going to take place. So the total tau, as I mentioned, could actually decrease per day. But what would that means that if there's on the inverse of this, what we just did, if there's more d-tau added to this pool, then it's going to increase the price of tau relative to d-tau, because you're going to have less tau per total d-tau. If this is hopefully make And then that will mean that you have several factors that go into the price of DTAO. So if stakers increase the amount of stake at that subnet specific level, then DTAO goes up. If there are unstakers, now these could be just holders of the DTAO token, like say you and me. They could be validators, they could be subnet owners, or they could be miners, right? So miner is earning the DTAO token and needs to pay their electric bill and other costs associated with being a miner. They'll take that and they will sell that. So when they sell DTAO, what that does is actually decrease the price of the TAO because you're selling that. So depending on where you get into this, like ratio of these two will really make a big difference. These are some of the things that I wrote down here. What does it mean? You can gain or lose TAO in the ecosystem without buying more by, like right now, you just stake it at a validator and you earn rewards, right? So you can earn more TAO that way. With this, you're going to have two different ways, right? You could stake it at subnet, and then your DTAO, you don't actually receive it, it goes to the validator of your choice. So now the quantity of DTAO that you set at that specific validator could increase or decrease because of the emissions in the system, so you're earning from the validator. And then second, depending on how other players in the system, subnets, token holders, other validators, or miners choose to what they do with their DTAO, if they go through and sell that back into TAO, then that could decrease the price so you could lose TAO. Now, the inverse could happen if you believe that there's going to be more stakers coming on board into this, then that would increase TAO, right? So by switching to this, it helps basically secure the network, makes it more resilient, I guess would be a better way of putting it, in many different ways. They didn't talk about how the ratio is going to be set. So I've set up pools on Uniswap before that have never been set up before. And you get to pick the ratio. Well, on Uniswap's a little bit different because it's not, like on Uniswap you can put an exact quantity of what you want in there. It's not 50-50. But how this is going to be set up at the initial start of this, and the first players to get in there to get potentially really advantageous ratios on these things, which will be very interesting to see how this plays out. And as they iron out more of the details, this is a giant shift. And I think I talked about everything else on there too. So if you guys want to check this out, I would say check out Twitter, my Twitter, but also next week we're going to cover the whole part of this network, which makes it super interesting, is actually the consensus mechanism. The UMA consensus mechanism is what allows this to take place. And my personal belief is that we're going to see a giant increase in subnets because you can effectively create a company that somebody else can build. Think of like, one of the things I always wanted when I was younger, I was homeschooled my whole entire life. And I always wanted to be recognized for the actual effort that I put into something. You know, not because I knew somebody who got me a job or this, that, and the other thing. I wanted to be recognized for the actual contribution that I made. This consensus network helps that allow to happen. So now we're going to see tons of subnets created that basically form another company that somebody else can build. You don't even have to build that company, which is amazing. Obviously, you're not getting all the rewards from it, but large companies like Amazon, Jeff Bezos doesn't own all of Amazon. Same thing with Tesla. Musk doesn't own all of that. There's a bunch of people who also make money, like the suppliers make money from it, the employees make money from it, the investors make money from it. So there's many different people involved. Bondholders make money from it, right? So there's many different people who can make money along the process, and this is the same way, but it allows us to do it in a decentralized way. So we're going to talk about that in the next video. So make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you then. Peace.